A united Conservative Premier has convinced a Liberal Prime Minister to back off his own party's laws and pave the way for a potential new oil pipeline to the West Coast. Feels like a huge win for Danielle Smith, doesn't it? Let's see what the political panel has to say. Erika Barootes used to work for Smith and is the former president of the United Conservative Party. And Sabrina Grover is a strategist who worked on the Liberal campaign this past spring. Now, Erika, I'm going to assume you think this is a slam dunk for Smith, so I'm going to start with Sabrina. So, Sabrina, slam dunk?
I do, actually. This is one of the rare times I think Eric and I will agree on a number of things. Yeah, I think it was a really well done and well executed MOU and plan from Premier Smith. I think there's a lot still to know, and there's a lot of details to iron out. There's a proponent to still, to find to actually build a pipeline. But I think from where we stand today, I think that Danielle Smith has a win under her belt for sure.
Something still to know is the reaction from her base. So our Jason Markusoff has been speaking with the separatist bloc of the UCP membership, which is telling him that this MOU isn't enough. They want out of Canada. So Erika, isn't the true test of whether this is a big win for Smith going to be how the deal's received by the membership at the party's AGM in Edmonton this weekend?
Yeah, and I would say I wasn't really looking forward to an AGM because there's so many people there this week. But with this announcement, I think she can come in and hold her head high and address all of the potential pushback. One, I think her tone needs to be like, we fought Ottawa and we won. But also that subtle undertone that you're talking about, which is we did it because we're within Canada. And I know Markusoff's story, but I don't really know how big that separatist quote unquote movement still really is. So we'll find out this weekend, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be an overwhelming standing ovation support for the Premier.
Okay, let's pivot to the Prime Minister, Sabrina. Mark Carney has shifted his language on this topic. In June, he said he would not impose a project on a province. Today, when he was asked by our Anis Hadari if BC needs to agree to a pipeline, he said there needs to be benefits for the province. So the Liberals have 2 seats in Alberta. I don't need to remind you. They have 20 in BC. We got a new Angus Reid poll out today showing only 53% of British Columbians could support a pipeline. Is Carney playing with political fire here?
I think that the national polling around energy infrastructure, including a pipeline, is overwhelmingly positive for Mark Carney, and it's more so today than it ever has been, in the last 10 years. I think that Mark Carney is riding high on that, and I think that he made a strategic move to sign this MOU. I think all of the other pieces that fall into place, like whether a pipeline actually does get built, and if we do get a proponent and we do get something to Tidewater, really still remains to be seen. But I think for Mark Carney, the play here was to commit to the idea that we're no longer going to say no, that we're going to build nation-building energy projects, and to get Alberta on side. And he's done all 3 of those things, right? This is the best relationship a Liberal Prime Minister has had with an Alberta Premier in years. So I think he's probably thinking about BC, but I think he had a number of wins before he's thinking about that, first of mind.
So if there's a political price to pay, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's not yet in BC. So Smith was pointing out today there's no language around a veto in this MOU. Erika, what do you think of how Carney is trying to thread this needle with both the province of BC and First Nations? Because while he said there needs to be partnership with First Nations and benefits, he hasn't said if that includes the coastal First Nations that are opposed to this project.
Well, and I think that the MOU is just the starting block to the people in BC that, were a part of that 47%, they also don't have the details. And I think a big piece that even we heard from Premier Eby, who was against it, was on that Indigenous piece. And so if they can work hard and take a model like the AIOC that we have here in Alberta and really give those Indigenous groups and tribes that are along that pipeline skin in the game, I think that there's a very different conversation, not just with those stakeholders, but as well with the greater BC. And I think that there's appetite. There's still lots of work to do, but this is such a monumental time in history for us to have a Liberal government after 10 years that didn't work with Alberta, working with Alberta for a productive solution that benefits all Canadians.
To be clear, the opposition that poll found is less than 40% 7%. There are a lot of people still hadn't made up their minds on this. Hey, so I guess what I'm wondering about is if we're not, if rubber's not hitting the road yet, and I heard my colleague David Cochrane asking Tim Hodgson, the energy minister, these questions today, and he's saying, take a deep breath. We're not at that point yet. Are you both saying that at some point this will get tricky for the Prime Minister, this question of whether or not, in opposition to those coastal First Nations, potentially a government in British Columbia, he will have to impose a pipeline and pay a price? Sabrina?
I think he's going to have to navigate that issue really carefully because, again, it's not just about getting this project done with the coastal First Nations. It's also about whether or not it risks the existing 2 LNG projects that were in that major projects list before. So it really will be important. But it does seem like, based on EB's reaction today, it was a bit more muted, say, than some of his more spicier reactions last week. I think it's in Premier Eby's interest to be acting as the defender of BC, and I think he's always going to play that role. But I think it's important for us as a country to think about what are the nation-building projects that matter. And if this is one of them, and we do believe that it's going to be important for our economic success domestically and pivoting away from the United States, then they may have to come to some sort of agreement. But I do think, as Minister Hodgson said, it's down the line. I think that this government does have a more robust understanding of how to engage with First Nations than they did perhaps even in May or June this year with Bill C-5,
Okay.
and I think it'll be important to see how that plays out.
Let's zoom out then as we wrap up and be prisoners of the moment, because there are going to be a lot of twists and turns on this in the months ahead. But it feels like this could be a turning point in terms of the relationship between Alberta and Ottawa after years of acrimony. Erika, do you think it's now a thing of the past?
I don't know if it's a thing of the past, but I think one of the big things, and even from the separatist fringe part of our province, is that we didn't feel respected and heard by Ottawa. And Mark Carney today at the Calgary Chamber of Commerce event said he's almost undoing the 10 years of wrong. He was taking a lot of ownership for his Liberal party during that tenure. And so I do think that this is looking at 2 governments that are coming together and making concessions. Smith didn't get every one of her 9 requirements from the federal government. Carney obviously has some navigating within his own party, including, having a strong federal minister step aside. I do think that there's a lot of bumps, but I think all Canadians, especially those that elected a man that was going to make Canada an economic superpower, should celebrate today.
30 seconds, Sabrina. Turning point for this relationship?
I mean, I've never been in a room where a Liberal Prime Minister in Calgary got 2 standing ovations, so I do certainly think it was a positive moment for Alberta. I think that Mark Carney, as Erika said, is going to have to deal with some of the pieces in his caucus. Notably, Guilbeault resigning today is important and does potentially shift a signal to other ministers or other MPs. But I think it's something that he's going to work through. I think that he's a very skilled politician, and we've been able to see that over the last many months.
You two are very skilled too. Appreciate you coming on the show again.
Thanks for having us.